for 28 Days and Beyond.
The show where we talk about our history, our heritage, and our culture.
I'm Amari.
I'm Kharisma. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi, Amari.
I'm all right. What?
You what? You just jumped the gun there.
Jumping the gun.
But I did want to know how you are.
No, well, don't worry about it now.
Okay.
All right. Yo, do Black lives matter to God?
Whoa. It's a big question.
Yeah. It's much better than the small talk of how are you? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, but maybe
Work your
a
way
little
up.
leeway.
Yeah, I got you, yeah.
I mean, are you asking my personal thoughts?
Yeah.
Yes.
What
Go ahead.
evidence do you have? Like, is that something that you want to believe, or is it something that's true?
Well, I believe that God is love. So if God is love, then he loves everyone. And in everyone, it's Black people. I have heard arguments that say otherwise.
I mean, what are some of those arguments that you've heard?
Well, a lot of those arguments center around this idea that Black people have been oppressed for so long, and how could a loving God allow the atrocities that have occurred throughout the world? But, you know, if we're just going to talk about specifically in the United States with slavery and the Atlantic slave trade, how could a loving God allow those things to happen?
Are these not the questions that the people want answers to?
I mean, they're fair questions.
Yeah.
They're fair questions.
But
there's good and evil in the world. So no matter how much good there is, there's still going to be evil.
okay, this is, I mean, like, I wasn't going to take it here, but since you brought it there.
Well, come on.
I'm curious, though, this idea that there's good and evil in the world. But here's one that I've always wondered. If this understanding of God as love is what you say it is, and God is all powerful, then how is there any room for evil that does not pale into comparison to the power of God?
Well, in my belief system, there's also this notion of free will and choice, right? So if God is all-knowing and all-powerful, but there's no choice in the matter for what you are able to do, meaning God is here and he's just controlling every aspect, then there really is no free choice. It's you doing what's being told to you, right?
But instead it sounds like you're painting an image of God as an unconcerned parent.
I'm not painting that image. If that's the art that you want to go with, fine, but that is not my paintbrush.
You know, these are questions and conversations that people have been having for a long time. Like you said, I mean, considering the tumultuous history that, you know, African people have had in the world, with, you know, speaking specifically about this country, how can we be committed to a God who has allowed something like this to happen? Maybe that's just a lack of understanding on our part, right?
Perhaps.
This is one of the many questions that we will be exploring on today's show. Our guest is Timothy Lucky, and, well, we'll see where it takes us. We'll be back with more 28 Days and Beyond. Welcome back to 28 Days and Beyond, and we're joined now by Dr. Timmy Lucky.
Hi,
How's it going?
Thanks for being here.
I'm doing well, thank you.
So do Black lives matter to God?
Well, I think that's a good question, but the default is always, of course, Black lives matter to God. But in reality, we have these questions about the kind of atrocities that are committed against African Americans and just people of color around the world. So I think it's a question that has a default answer, but there's a reality that's associated with this whole concept of Black lives value with God.
So where do we kind of go in that conversation when there's this idea of, if we look around, right, and we look at even the current state of our country in 2019, with the current administration, with the amount of police killings, with the amount of justice that's not received on the other end of that, when it's blatant, where do we go in that conversation?
So now we can talk about the social issue that we have with that, which is just wrong. But I think in order for us to do that intelligently, we have to take a step back. Because we have to deal with this whole construct of race. It's this fake thing that people believe to be real. So I did an exercise in my class with my students. So I'm gonna do it with you.
All right, let's do it. Exercise.
So I'm gonna say something, I want you to answer me. I'm gonna point to you when I want you to answer, okay? What's 5 plus 5?
10.
Answer together.
Oh, 10.
What's
10.
That's a collective point.
What's 7 plus 3?
10.
What's 12 minus 10? What's 12 minus 2?
10.
What's 8 plus 2?
10.
What's 1 plus 9?
10.
What's an aluminum can made out of?
10.
Aluminum.
See, what I just did
Yeah,
was I
10.
imposed an idea, a construct
Oh, I see.
on you.
Yeah,
10,
'cause-
10.
'cause
Okay,
10,
got
'cause
you.
it's a
Yeah.
10
Yes.
right?
But it's
Yeah.
really aluminum.
It is aluminum.
Okay.
Right?
That's
But what
yeah.
I did was I threw you off by making you say 10.
Yeah.
But I imposed onto you to make you say 10.
Yeah.
But it's an imposed idea. It's a fake idea.
I see what you did there.
that you grasp because I made it. I created it. So I created this construct and I gave it to you. And that's what people run with. And that's the unfortunate thing when you talk about the value of a black life as opposed to the value of a white life. It's an imposed construct that people accept as a truth, but it's not true.
So the thing, of course, we know that race was invented and reinvented. It is
Yes.
it is always being invented, in the process of being invented,
Yes.
right? I mean, you know what?
Re-engineered,
right, you know,
refocused. Yes.
in 20 years from now, race will not look the same. Just like race now doesn't look like it looked 20 years ago in terms of,
Absolutely.
but at the same time, it's an invented idea that does manifest itself in real ways in people's lives. There are entire industries, there are entire legacies, there are entire identities that have been
Absolutely.
based off of this. So how do we account for that? And I mean, especially we talk about, of course, right? Do Black Lives Matter to God? Well, yeah, we would say yes, they do. With that question, though, you're actually asking something deeper than just, what's on the surface. You're speaking to the idea that race is a construction and created by man.
man,
Right.
yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
So if we look at this construct, and it's something that's been accepted, and it's essentially been implanted on us. And when I say us, I mean humanity,
Right.
because everybody views people of color a certain way, and I don't want to just say that it's just this construct, but it's a construct that was created and developed for a purpose.
For a purpose, yes.
And this purpose is always, no matter how you slice it, no matter where you look at things, there's a purpose for these constructs. There's a purpose for direction. And it's got to do with real estate, resources, and ultimately money. And when we talk about race as a construct, it's got monetary gain for somebody.
Yeah.
For somebody.
And you whittle it down and you boil it down where the rubber meets the road. It's about somebody getting money, power, and position. And to do that, they have to make someone else disadvantaged.
Wow. Well, we definitely want to get more into
More
this
into that,
idea
right.
of racial construct and then kind of circle back to this notion of Black Lives Mattering to God.
To God.
Yes.
And in retrospect. So we're going to take a little bit of a break, but then we'll be back with more 28 Days and Beyond Energies. Welcome back to 28 Days and Beyond. We're still here with Dr. Timmy Lucky. So I was thinking when, you shared the experiment that you do with your class, and I remember this was years ago. I was a teenager, and it's still very fresh in my memory. And I was watching an episode of Law and Order with my parents and one of my mom's partners for work. And he's an older white gentleman. And there was a criminal that was, on the screen, and he said something along the lines of, oh, the guy's this big, burly black guy, and blah, 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 blah. He's so scary. And then my mom paused, and she said, he looks like Kenny, my dad. And it was like in that moment you saw him kind of take a step back, and it's like, okay, this idea that's being presented here is being presented to incite this idea of black man that's large and fear, right? So it's this idea that, like you said, the construct of race being made for a very specific purpose and really having to reframe our thinking to get out of that idea. So.
But one of the things with that exercise is that it's also playing to a subconscious. That was a subconscious, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
You're associating 10 and right? But what I hear in this story is also, they have these, what do they call them? Inherent biases tests, where they'll show
Yes.
you pictures and you have to, right? And that this is always operating on a much deeper level than just what's immediate. Oh, right. I don't look at you and say, oh, this is a black man. It's not a conscious thought that's happening in my mind. It's something that's been conditioned over.
Which is why when we ask the question, do Black Lives Matter to God, the default conscious response is of course. But then, like you said, there's another level
Right.
that's really reactionary. When I was in the Air Force, we had a chief master sergeant. It was the highest enlisted rank you can get. He was black. And there was a problem that he had to go and resolve. And I worked in one squadron, my counterpart worked in another squadron. So my counterpart was white. So the chief went over there and kind of just laid down the law and straightened the guys out. Just say, hey, this is what's gonna happen, this is what needs to happen, period. When I come back, that's what I want to happen. So the chief comes back to me and we talk, because we're friendly, the chief is black. I talked to my counterpart, the white guy. He said, yeah, there's this big chief came over here. He was laying down the law. He said he intimidated everybody. You know, he's this big black guy and he just kind of just laid it down the law. The chief was actually about 5'6", and he was a small guy.
Yeah.
He was a petite guy. He was a runner, so he stayed, you know, fit.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of towered over the chief, and it let me know about this construct of race and perceptions, like you said. You know, there's this big black guy, but it wasn't a big black guy. It was an angry black man, which is perceived differently. So I work in corporate America as a computer scientist, and I can't get angry in a conference room. First of all, I'm kind of big, and as a big guy, I don't want to be this big, black, angry man because of this construct of race that operates at a subliminal kind of level. So I'm always conscious of that. If I'm on an elevator, if I get on an elevator and there's a white woman on the elevator, I immediately, because I understand this construct of race, I say, hi, how are you today? I try to put her at ease immediately because I don't want her standing there clutching her purse thinking that I'm going to attack her.
And that happens a lot too, where it's like, even in these horrible situations where we see people are murdered or killed and they're wronged in some way, you almost immediately see people trying to find a reason to justify it. You know what I mean? Like, oh, it happened because this person didn't do X, Y, and Z. And it's like, no, at the end of the day, if a person is going into a situation and there's already a bias present, and all of us have certain biases just by default. If those biases are present, then it's like anything that happens after that, you're coming into the situation already with a certain
preconceived perception, preconceived notion. Absolutely.
But how would you if it's not only something that is subliminal, it's also something that's generations deep. How do we go about changing something like that?
Anytime you talk about changes of culture, it doesn't happen quickly. It's like trying to turn a cruise ship. You can't just pull a U-turn with a cruise ship. It takes a wide turn and you got to have room to make the turn. So, but we got to have a concerted effort to do it. And we have to practice this. It's something that we have to practice because imagery means a lot. So, I mean, I don't think it's something that can happen overnight, but I think generationally it happened. So generationally we can change it.
Got you.
Yeah.
Well, we really thank you for joining us for this discussion today.
Absolutely.
We want to believe that Black Lives Matter to God for sure.
They do, and the Bible even tells us that they do.
Well, that's it.
We just have to deal with this construct that man has created.
Well, thank you again, Dr. Timmy Lucky, and
absolutely.
We'll be back with more 28 Days and Beyond after this. And we're back on 28 Days and Beyond. Kharisma.
Amari.
Yeah.
So, do Black Lives matter to God?
I don't know.
Why do you still not know?
I mean, you know, I think I'd have to talk to God directly to find out. You know what I'm saying? Like, because what I'm saying is, it's a matter of what you want to believe, and you want to believe if you want to believe, right? Because we say yes, but what evidence do we have for that?
What evidence do we have for
exactly the existence of God at all?
Yeah,
it's a faith-based thing.
Right.
You know, you have faith, and you have a connection to something larger than yourself, so on and so forth, right? But I think that the matter part is really less about do Black Lives matter to us?
Now that,
you know what I'm saying?
As a whole,
right?
The way I've been feeling is no, as a whole.
Why is that?
Well, it's evident in how Black people are treated, not even just in the States, but around the world, and in people of color, I should say, around the world. The fact that we still have to fight to be considered worthy of mattering. Like the fact that we're having this conversation and it's a discussion kind of proves that.
All right, so now that's it.
Okay.
And this is what I really think is the direction that I would take.
Okay.
Do Black Lives Matter to God would suggest that there's a possibility that they don't.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Well, part of it has to do with we spend so much time concerned with how others are treating us and how others see us and how others perceive us, is being like, yo, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What matters to us is our lives, and we love ourselves so much that we're going to take our own lives into our own hands, right? We are going to, you know, worship a God that looks like us, a God that has our best interests at heart. We're going to build our own institutions. We're going to take care of our own children, despite whatever's going on around us.
Right.
We're not expecting anyone else to do for us what we can only do for ourselves, right?
True.
And in that sense, then it's like, oh, right, that shifts the entire frame of the conversation to one of self-determination,
Right.
of self-reliance, and ultimately liberation.
Well, I don't think self-determination or self-reliance has been the center of, you know, the conversation of do Black Lives Matter, because we've always been a resilient people. We've always been determined. We've always had to fight harder, do more, put more effort forward. So it's never been an issue of us. But to your point, I do think once we get to the point where we're more concerned about, okay, yeah, we know that these are the obstacles that exist out there in the world, but what can we do within our own communities, within our own homes, within our own schools and religious institutions to help build and push past all those other obstacles that are trying to hold us back.
That's it.
And keep us down. So.
This has been another episode of 28 Days and Beyond,
where we talk about our history, our heritage, and our culture. We'll see you next time.
Peace.